While we're waiting for people, I'm just going to say a word about the Black Swan I'm sitting in front of. It's by a wonderful artist from Creativity Explored in San Francisco, which works with developmentally disabled artists. Her name is Selena. Oh God, I haven't had to read this in a while, and now I'm not quite making it. I can post it later. But I love it both because it's a powerful work of art and because a black swan is something that happens rarely but is immensely powerful in changing the course of events. And so I love it as a piece of art and as a sort of black swan reminder. So I think we just had about 47 black swans in the last week, a whole flock of them. Mm-hmm. And because I thought, like, why not have a good Zoom background when the pandemic struck, instead of like proving to people that I own books, which I feel has already been taken for granted by enough people. But so me and Selena Perez's Black Swan over here in San Francisco on Ohlone territory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Rebecca.
Listen, you're welcome. You're welcome. Introduce me, introduce you, introduce the swan. You know, it's not just people here. It's
exactly. If everyone else gets an introduction, the swan and the art.
Yeah. Well, it's, crediting the artist and introducing the black swan concept, because one of the things I want to talk about is some of the black swans that have been honking and flapping around in the last couple of weeks. And I think we're in a really different place than we were even when we started visualizing this event. And the roller coaster has looped a bunch more loops, to swap my metaphors out.
Yep. So I say we go ahead and get started. I know that folks will continue joining us. We're just hanging out with 200 of our closest friends right now, everyone. So just, say hi to each other in the chat if you haven't yet, and enjoy each other tonight. I want to thank everyone here. Given all this going on in the world, it is something to say yes to this conversation and to arrive here tonight, whether it's 1 a.m. your time or it's 5 p.m. your time on the West Coast. Thank you for being here and for your dedication. So my name is Anastasia Shemkis. I am delighted to be hosting this conversation alongside my two teammates, Jessica Sorrente and Seth Bush. So they're waving at you, and you'll hear more from them later. And I also just want to thank Rebecca, for being here. Thank you for your generosity this past week in partnering with us to bring this event to people, and for really for your work the last several years on hope and social change, which I know for myself, that's exactly what I want tonight, is getting renourished and replenished, fueled up to go into these final 26 days of the election and do my part. So thank you for your work and for inspiring this conversation, Rebecca.
My pleasure. Oh my God, 26 days.
Every day.
It's funny though, because so many people, I'm going to vote tomorrow, and so many people, and we're really having like a 6-week election rather than a 1-day election, which I think is part of the good news around this. And a lot of ballots will be in before November 3rd. Mm-hmm. Right. Sorry to interrupt your flow.
Oh, you're great. You're doing fine. I know that we are all definitely Zoom experts, perhaps at this point, but I'm going to run through just a few logistics for the night because there are so many of us. So first, you might have noticed we're recording this, so you can just rest easy knowing you will get the recording in your inbox after this event. We're also streaming live on Facebook, so you can wave hi to the folks out there just tuning in on Facebook. And you can also share this Facebook Live event so that we can reach more people, and you can find it at Rebecca's page. She is also shared it. So if you find Rebecca Solnit on Facebook, you can like and even share the Facebook Live so that more people can reach this hope and action conversation in the countdown to the election. We'd love for you to be off video. I see so many of your like happy faces already, and I'm delighted by that. And please stay off camera if you would. We're all, you're all on mute tonight because there are a few hundred of us together. So that's to everyone's benefit for us to be on mute. But please continue to share your reflections in the chat box as we go along. You can submit questions to Rebecca or to the Radical Support Collective team throughout the evening by sending them to my friend Jeremy, who's on this call, who his name has been written in as @questions, and you can just find him in the chat. You can, click down on that drop-down menu, and you can send him a private message, sending him whatever question you have for Rebecca, and we will sprinkle in a few of those throughout the evening. So you can even practice this right now and send Jeremy a private hi, and I promise you he'll love getting 300 highs at once.
And Anastasia, by the way, I think you meant to say on camera. We would love to see people on camera, see your beautiful faces. So
on camera,
yes.
No, thank you. On camera is accurate. There you go. I want to see your faces. So that is Zoom logistics. Now we're all even further experts. And could we have the next slide, please? So Seth, Jess, and I are, we're coaches, we're professionally trained coaches, and we come to, can you go back one? Thank you, perfect. So we all come to coaching via over a decade of working for climate and racial justice, among many other issues. And our work being grounded in this vision of a more just future is why we're hosting this event tonight, why we care so much about engaging in the election over the next 26 days. And it's why we do what we do at Radical Support Collective, which is coach change makers like you all. And we support people to live and make an impact in a way that that a more just and life-sustaining world is possible as a result of your life. When all is said and done, you've lived the life that you'd truly love to live, and the world is left better for it. So we, through coaching one-on-one and in group programs and through conversations just like this, we work with change makers because this is our vision for the world. And so Seth, you can take the slides down so we can see each other's faces. This is great. Oh, I'm just looking at some of the faces staring back at me, and I see familiar friends and new friends. I hope that you can see the same.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. Wow is right.
And
yeah, please, Rebecca.
Were we at the point where I got to ask you all in the collective a question? Or you guys have a very structured agenda, and I'm a sort of loosey-goosey events person, so
You have a question burning for us that you want to ask us?
Yeah, I'd wanted to ask you, to talk a little bit. Your work is helping people ground and orient themselves in their activism so it's sustainable, so it's effective, so it's powerful, so they don't burn out. And I wanted to ask you why you stepped back from doing the activism itself to working with people's attitudes, orientations, assumptions that motivate or drag down the work they do.
Yeah.
And that would be all three of you in the collective.
Yeah. I'll start, and then Seth and Jess, I think that I want to start with just sharing a little bit of work about, like, a little bit of my work with my clients, because that's why I do this work. You know, I still consider myself an organizer. My organizing just now takes shape as a coach and in coaching sessions. But just recently, I was coaching with a group of folks who are all active on climate justice. And, you know, each of these folks are absolutely incredible, giving everything they've got to climate work and creating a more just world. And we were just recently looking at despair over where we're at in the world right now. Resignation given the 2020 election. And my clients were saying to me, I don't even know if what I'm doing is worth it. I don't know if I want to do anything on the election. I do my climate work. I'm dismayed that nothing seems to be able to stop Trump. So, you know, maybe some of you have had these thoughts before. I know that I hear them in my own brain from time to time. And what I got to do with my clients was really just acknowledge the moment that we're in and not deny anything. Like, what we're seeing is real and it's scary and there's so much uncertainty. But then I supported them to each ground in what are the values that they most treasure. What are the things they see in the leaders that inspire them? And each of my clients, you know, in the same moment that they were talking about their despair and resignation, also got to be present to the values they hold most dear and look at how could I be showing up in the election to demonstrate my values. And what we got was just a like 10% more like ease and gap of possibility. And each of my clients left that night and later were saying to me, thank you, that was medicine. Thank you, I have my next action on the election. Thank you, I needed that. I felt like I needed that recognition and community. So that is why I coach change makers, because of that gap that we can create when we no longer have to only acknowledge our despair, but we can also see ways to take action from our values.
Is it partly, speaking as somebody who's been around the left and activist my whole adult life, partly that people think if I can't do everything, then I can't do anything? And that, you know, if I can't achieve a guaranteed major final comprehensive victory, then I have no power. And because, you know, when you speak of gaps, that's one of the gaps I run across a lot, is people who aren't convinced that even if you can't do everything, it might be worth doing something. Yeah. And that we don't know what you do does.
Yeah.
You know, I've been thinking about this a little bit, and thinking about how something one of my coaching buddies said to us recently is that we can't help but live our lives by possibility. If you think about it, we can't help but live our lives by possibility, because this organ that we have in our skull is a possibility generating machine, right? And one of the possibilities that this organ in our skull loves to generate, in addition to a whole bunch of terrible possibilities for what could go wrong, how things are going wrong, how everything is falling apart, one of the possibilities is that, well, I'll never make a difference. But this possibility generating organ, this brain that we have, also has the ability to generate some really incredible possibilities and ideas for how the future works. And that it generates sometimes some terrible possibilities, there's nothing wrong with it, right? It's just how we evolved to be able to keep ourselves safe, right? To look out for danger wherever it might show up. And one of the ways that we keep ourselves in the cave, so to speak, is by listening to this conversation that, oh, well, I can't possibly make a difference when everything is this big and going wrong. And what I love to do as a coach is help people see, and what we do as Radical Support Collective is help people kind of get some space from that very certain thinking that they have sometimes, that they couldn't possibly make a difference, or that everything is falling apart, and get a little bit more interested in the possibilities that they would really love to be putting their life's work and energy into. Because at the end of the day, wouldn't you love folks to be able to look back and say, yeah, you know, I had a lot of thoughts about what could go wrong, but I chose to put my attention on what could go right. And that's where I put my life's work. And it tends to yield a little bit more enjoyment and spaciousness and satisfaction, such that then you have leaders that we get to work with going to other people and spreading that possibility. And also, I think, a sense of creativity and, frankly, strategy. Because when we are stuck in that crisis mode of everything that could go wrong, we are just not strategic, we're not creative, and we're not kind to ourselves, and we're not kind to other people. And right now in this moment, we need to be kind to ourselves and kind to other people and have compassion. So that's my answer to your question, Rebecca, of this is an opportunity to shift from some of those familiar conversations of I couldn't possibly make a difference.
What's so fascinating for me about that is that people have absolute confidence. They know, you know, that they can't do anything, you know, so there's this kind of lack of confidence that they can have any impact, and this absolute confidence that they know exactly the, you know, what the future holds, namely a future in which they will have no impact. And that weird mix that goes into despair and defeatism of confidence and its lack is one of the things that I think is antithetical to hope and very habitual in the activist cultures I've spent my life in. So thank you for undermining them.
Yeah. And Rebecca, that's been part of what's so inspiring to me when I read your work is I never engaged with the word hope in the way that I have when I read your work. And when I read Hope in the Dark, or you and I were, you know, we're prepping for this conversation and talking about that idea of hope, I experienced what I experience when I'm coaching my clients, which is this, like, my nervous system relaxes because I realize I don't have to pretend anything. All I have to do is recognize the possibilities that come with the fact that we can't predict the future, that come with the fact that things are uncertain. And I love so much that you are one of the voices marrying how we can be effective and strategic on creating more justice in the world and pairing that with an idea and a concept called hope. It's transformational for me.
I think of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Greta Thunberg, both of whom were the kind of women and girls who are told that they're not going to matter, they're not going to make a difference, and who nevertheless stepped up and became these huge, huge figures in the fate of the world. And the fact that Ocasio-Cortez was inspired to run for office because of what she experienced at Standing Rock has also been so important to, or just so magic, because one of the things I think is really important in being hopeful is knowing that you don't know, well, not only do you not know what will happen, but things often have really significant consequences that are not the consequences anyone intended. What did Standing Rock achieve? There's a very simple defeatist version where it's like, well, they didn't stop the pipeline. And if you want to do that very reductive narrative, but there's now a court order out stopping the flow of oil. They inspired people to take so many other kinds of action. They created a lot of ripples in Native communities that were very positive and encouraging. And they sent, encouraged Ocasio-Cortez to run for office. And that amazing film of her campaign, you see the moment where she realizes that she's won, and you realize that she's as astonished as anyone is. And it's pretty great. And it's that unpredictability that I'd like to hang on to, in reminding people to be hopeful. And I see a question, can we talk about the climate disaster? Fear not, we will. And lots of it. But what happens next? Highly organized people.
Well, I want to just ask everybody that's here a question, because, you know, as we've been pointing to already in this conversation, this 2020 has been a doozy, y'all. Like the climate crisis, the crisis facing the state of our democracy, the pandemic. We've been hit with a lot in the last couple months. No. And as Seth and Anastasia were talking about before, something that one of the reasons I'm bringing this up is because, you know, when we are up to things that are really important to us, like creating a world that is life-sustaining and just, and we're looking at questions like, what is mine to do to make the world better? Something that will invariably happen for all of us is that we bump up against a little bit of what we might call like an agitated brain, as Seth was pointing to earlier, right? A little like worry, who am I to make the world better? How could it be possible? It's too far gone, right? Maybe I'd like to just like see a show of hands if anyone here has ever had a thought like that before, or maybe it's just me. Oh, good. Okay, it's not just me. That's a relief. So the question that I want to pose to you all is just like, what would it be like, given how important this election is for you, given how much work there is, how much, you know, as Rebecca mentioned earlier, just like things are changing so fast. We really have no idea what's going to come in the next 26 days. We can't pretend we have any idea what the outcome is. But regardless of that, what would it be like for you to wake up on November 4th, the day after the election, with no regrets? Like just knowing that you did what was yours to do, regardless of how things unfold, regardless of whether we have the results. And you can put that in the chat. What was yours?
And I'm so glad you asked that question, Jess, and I'm glad to see people already replying. I want to ask people to really take in what Jess is asking you and feel that possibility of waking up with no regrets.
Mm-hmm. At peace, liberating, the best kind of exhausting, breathing, energized. Yeah, it would be pretty nice, right? And remember that when I asked you this question, I didn't say that we won. I didn't say that it was clean cut, we were done, we're off the hook. There will be more challenge there inevitably, right? Just in life for us to face. So that's why we wanted to have this conversation with Rebecca. And I please keep sharing in the chat. But Rebecca, we decided to call this conversation Hope in Action. Mm-hmm. And I would love to just start by, I guess we've already started. I would love to continue by asking you to kind of weave these things together for us about what is as you see it, what's the connection between cultivating hope in ourselves and this, the practice of having hope with what everybody here wants so badly, right? Which is to have no regrets as they go out into the next month doing what there is for them to do.
I want to just talk a little bit about what hope is and then how it applies to this situation. Hope for me is neither optimism nor pessimism. Both of those are full of certainty. The future has already happened and I know what it is. Optimists are everything's going to be great and I can kick back because it doesn't require anything of me. Pessimists are, we're doomed, it sucks, and there's nothing you can do about it, which also gets you off the hook. And I often see among more privileged people defeatism as sometimes having an element of excuse. Since you can't change anything, you don't have to try to change anything. Hope for me is an embrace of the profound uncertainty of what's going to happen next, and a sense that in that uncertainty there might be room to act. And some of my hope comes not from looking towards the future, which is dark and unknowable, but from looking to the past and seeing how ordinary people, the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the Cortezes, the Greta Thunbergs, the people who pulled together Standing Rock, the Sunrise Movement, etc., have made things happen that wouldn't have happened otherwise, not because they were anointed and elect and powerful and, you know, when they set out, but because of a kind of stubborn determination that often was about, it is totally worth doing this without knowing the outcome, because we're in a culture that wants to control and manage and, you know, and know everything. And we're often told you really shouldn't leave the boundaries of what you know. You shouldn't go on a walk without your phone. You shouldn't talk to strangers. You shouldn't have adventures. You shouldn't, you know, kind of get out of your comfort zone, etc. And the future is outside your comfort zone. We don't know what's going to happen. One of the things that's amazing for me in this moment is 2 weeks ago, people were so despairing around us. Trump was making pretty strong assertions that he was not going to allow a transition of power. People saw him as very powerful, and they immediately fell into this despair. What are we going to do after the coup? And I kept saying, like, before you figure out what to do after the coup, why don't you figure out how to prevent the coup? First, by trying to get a landslide election, and in the election that will overwhelm their ability to challenge the, you know, who's won. And actually, that's what brought me to this group of people I'm talking to now. And I posted an incredible election guide. Maybe someone can put it in the comments, from Daniel Jubelirer, whose name I'm probably just mangled, on all the ways to plug in to work on the election. And then I also shared a piece from Waging Nonviolence about how to prevent a coup, because they can attempt a coup, but they don't necessarily succeed. But what's amazing is 2 weeks ago, Trump was riding high. Now he's like coming down from his steroid high. He might be sicker than he realizes. There's a, you know, I've been talking to a lot of doctors. This whole COVID, you know, Rose Garden Massacre, as the hashtag had, you know, super spreader event, has really knocked a big hole in their own, you know, promoted sense of self. And it's not something anyone anticipated. And I kind of remember that, you know, the week before this one, which feels like it was about 100 years ago, the New York Times dropped this huge investigation on Trump's taxes that was already a huge blow. And I thought that was like the big event of the week, because I'm still not fully used to Trump time, where like, you better check when you come back from lunch because everything might have changed. And then on that Tuesday night in the presidential debate, which I guess is now 8 days / 1,000 years ago, Trump did his Proud Boys shout out, and that created a whole second ruckus that was not particularly good for his campaign. And then I remember I actually went out running Thursday afternoon, and I came back. Hope Hicks had COVID. It turned out Amy Coney Barrett had lied about her Roe versus Wade position. Melania's tapes had leaked, where she said all those horrible things about the refugee kids, and that she didn't give a fuck about, to use her language. And what was the fourth thing? Oh, and the New Yorker and Jane Mayer had done an incredible expose on Kimberly Guilfoyle's incredibly sordid sexual harassment charges. And I was like, wow, that was really big. And this was all like unfolding in the California evening. And then like late that night, it dropped that Trump and, you know, FLOTUS and POTUS had tested positive for COVID. And it was just like, okay, the last 7 volcanoes were little volcanoes compared to this volcano. And it's interesting, because I think people want some kind of, we want security. Pema Chodron's like, we always want to walk on solid ground, and there is no solid ground under our feet. And I feel like the tide has turned. I feel confident in a way. I don't want to make people feel so confident they're like, I will sit back and let it happen. That's optimism. But there is this subtle shift happening that's really interesting. It's been happening for a while, of people just too taken aback by, you know, conservatives and moderates, and, you know, all not, you know, being like, this is just too extreme. This is too crazy. This is too corrupt. This is too gross. This is too vicious and callous. And, you know, things are shifting, which is only to say, not to say that we've already won, it's to say that this thing is winnable if we throw ourselves into it. So hope for me is about kind of riding the waves, knowing that another one, rogue waves come, that you don't know what will happen next. And that's what looking forward, that it's unpredictable. Looking backward, we do have this extraordinary history of civil society rising up, of popular power, of people who were not supposed to be powerful, like the women I just mentioned, and sort of the groups I just mentioned, changing the world. My formative experience really came in the late 80s when the Berlin Wall and the whole Eastern Bloc liberated itself from Soviet dominion in ways nobody ever anticipated. And Nelson Mandela, who's supposed to spend his whole life in prison, became president of the post-apartheid South Africa we didn't see coming, which was not perfect and magic in every way, but was a pretty radical change for the better. And then a couple years later, Native Americans really shifted the conversation around the quincentennial and really began to be a powerful force in the environmental movement, the beginnings of the climate movement. And the Zapatistas rose up in 1994. And none of these things nobody saw these things coming. And, so I came of age in this incredible era of unexpectedness. And I think that unexpectedness, which can also be terrible things, it can be Chernobyl, it can be coups and assassinations. It's just a reminder that we don't know what will happen next, and it's worth acting.
As you're saying that, Rebecca, I'm just thinking about how, in some ways, it's easier to sort of marvel at the miracle of the unexpected when looking back.
Yeah.
Because you referred to this moment as the roller coaster, right? Like what it's like to be looking back is a little different, but when we're on it, we're like on the ride, right? Like
yeah. No, it doesn't feel good. We like certainty, and we're little kids. We want to know mom loves us and she's never going to leave, and there will always be lunch, and it will always include gummy bears. And that is universal, right? And, and as, even as a kid, you have to deal with absolute uncertainty. And, mom might love you. She might not be able to come home this day for various reasons. The gummy bears run out. And, so just coming, I'm not saying that any of this is fun and easy. It would be fun if we all had the gift of prophecy, or maybe it wouldn't, because bad things also happen. But it would be fun to know what's going to happen next, or at least we think we want to know, and it would somehow assuage our anxiety, but we don't. And that's part of the work we have to do in life, inside our personal lives as well as activism, of not knowing quite what's going to happen and being prepared to meet what happens, knowing that the unexpected can knock on the door at any moment.
Yes. Yeah. I just want to everyone here, I'm noticing some of the chats popping up, people asking questions. So if you're joining late, just so you know, if you go to the chat, you can private message our friend Jeremy, who is at questions. He should be right at the top, and you can send any questions that you want to submit to bring into the conversation. And that's the best way to share them. So thank you. So to pick up on where we just were, we're talking about the roller coaster and the uncertainty, and how nice it would be if things were certain. Maybe might also just be very boring. But I've been thinking a lot lately about just what my experience is with, this little thing that a lot of us carry around with us, that like I flip it open at different times of the day to check social media or to check the news. And that as soon as I do that, I'm on the roller coaster. And something that often happens is there's this like, not always, but sometimes there's this like undertow of cynicism or fear or worry that comes up for me or anger when I see the most recent Trump tweet, or I see the newest thing on the news that has me running all of these possibilities for how this could now make things unfold in a way that I wouldn't want them to. I'd love for you to speak to how you choose to be hopeful while also telling the truth about the like the the real pain of watching these things happen, or the
Yeah.
real worry that comes up. Like, how do they, I know you don't hold them as in a dichotomy, but how do you hold them together?
And I think there's a tendency for a lot of us to think hope is an emotion and you should feel good. And one of the most powerful things I've run into recently is Mariam Kaba, the anti-prison activist, saying hope is a discipline. And I think that by discipline, it means partly it's a commitment, that you commit to stay with what you believe in, you commit to try and protect and defend what you value, who you stand with, and you do the work, even if you can't see that there will be results. And you look at stuff, Greta Thunberg with her little sign outside Swedish Parliament, like how many hotshot international news journalists, if you said, hey, a 15-year-old girl on the spectrum is going to stand outside Swedish Parliament with a cardboard sign, like, is this a big story? And, so there's a kind of tenacity to that. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said, hope is not something that you have. Hope is something you create with your actions. Hope is something you have to manifest into the world. And once one person has hope, it can be contagious. And one of the things I think about a lot, despair and defeatism are also contagious. And I look at how a lot of us communicate. And I think some of the places I've been, some of the people admire, I think in other parts of the world, there's a kind of esprit de corps that you are there to support and encourage other people. And I see people being, to use like bad 70s language, kind of downers, being kind of like, everything sucks, we're not going to win, you're not going to achieve anything with that, that's useless, it doesn't matter, we've already lost, you can't, every politician's completely sold out, etc. Something really profound that happened to me also is I reported pretty intensively on the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, and a lot of it was about lethal racism indirectly that left poor, mostly Black people behind to drown or otherwise, suffer in the flooded city. The demonization of people of color, also, a lot of police and vigilante violence that resulted, that killed people. But the other thing that happened was what always happens in disasters and what we saw at the beginning of this pandemic, which is extraordinary mutual aid. And that tells me something, and I wrote a whole book about this called A Paradise Built in Hell, about who we really are. But something specific happened the day after 80% of New Orleans went underwater. What sometimes got called the Cajun Navy, boat owners from all around the greater area, some as far away as Texas, drove to the city, even though they were being told these were dangerous, violent, criminal, looting, raping, marauding gangs, and the mass media was participating in that. None of these people thought they could rescue everyone in New Orleans. And you've got one fishing boat, one pirogue, one canoe, one whatever. And everyone thought they could do something, that maybe they could rescue someone. And it wasn't, the Coast Guard did a few good things. And so I see somebody saying, go Cajun Navy. I know that the Gulf is facing, thanks to climate change, a pretty horrific hurricane season, again, running into the Greek alphabet. But these people who went into this literally a city in turmoil, 80% underwater, to rescue strangers, not knowing what would happen, but knowing that they couldn't rescue everyone, but still believing it was worth rescuing someone. And that is the most valiant spirit I've ever seen. And I think it's a spirit you can go into anything, this election, addressing climate, so many other things that matter with, in that sense that you can't assume that you will fix everything. Nor can you assume that you will fix nothing. You might do something incredibly important. Something I often think about in protests and demonstrations and events where people want instant results is that I sometimes look at them and think, maybe the really important thing that happened here is that a 13-year-old who's going to be an incredible visionary catalyst, got found their commitment, found their people, found their spirit. Maybe what happened here isn't that we protested the Dakota Access Pipeline and they stopped it tomorrow. Maybe what happened is it inspired Ocasio-Cortez to run for Congress and bring the Green New Deal into the public eye and become a great voice for, against racism, misogyny, homophobia, et cetera. As recently as telling off Mike Pence on Twitter today. So, so that, like, be your own Cajun Navy, and is a big part of it for me.
Be your own Cajun Navy. Yeah.
Just that spirit of it. And I'm sure there are wrinkles and complications and not everybody there was perfect, but just, I know that's people doing what they can do, entering the profound unknown and doing it. And that's kind of what I think each of us can do.
Yeah.
And
we aren't given the luxury of knowing the results of the actions that we choose to take.
No, my partner loves this passage from Michel Foucault, which I never get right off the top of my head, but it basically goes, you know what you do, you know why you do it, but you don't know what you do does. You have control over what you do, you don't have control over what it does. And you could do something that, and I hear from people constantly who saw somebody else do something that was kind or generous or heroic, creative, in defiance of the majority, that inspired them, because all these good qualities are as contagious as the bad ones. And but you can't count on consequences, and you have to make wise choices based on what you know about how change happens and what's effective. And if you're protesting, you probably want someone to hear you, for example, but you can't assume you'll know how it works.
Yeah.
You don't know what you do does.
So that's actually a perfect segue into one of the questions that I wanted to ask you tonight, Rebecca, which is, like, I think something for many of us that is so powerful about the way that you speak about change is because of the fact that you're a historian. So you've got this practiced eye at looking back at the things people have done and the results that it's created, and you've probably seen some patterns over time. So from this moment, I'm curious, what is there are some doors of possibility, many doors of possibility cracked open in this moment that we want to see flung wide open. But what are the possibilities that you're seeing in this moment that could open up into the world that we really want?
One of the most extraordinary things that's happened during the pandemic, that, of course, because climate journalism never gets enough space and attention, it hasn't gotten enough attention, but nevertheless is profound, is the pandemic has pushed the fossil fuel industry a little bit further and faster into free fall. It is now possible, as it was not, to really defeat the major oil powers. And the coal industry is in a shambles, and the whole fossil fuel industry has been a really bad investment, has been going bankrupt. Fracking turns out to have been subsidized by Wall Street, hoping it would be profitable all along, and they're souring on investing in it. So we see that the whole fossil fuel industry is in crisis. And the worst case scenario, the Trumpy scenario, is that they get bailed out and they continue to destroy the climate, and as long as they can, until they've really run through their every possibility. And the question we've always had is not whether we will leave the age of fossil fuel behind, but when. And the fossil fuel companies know it will happen. They just want to pursue short-term profit as long as possible. Climate organizers want to do it as swiftly and comprehensively as possible. We now have a set of possibilities that are incredibly vulnerable. We have a much stronger, bolder climate movement with more traction than we've had before. And it's really important to defeat Trump. And when I think of, I think of the hundreds of reasons why a Biden-Harris administration would be better, all the things we won't have to do, like fight, to defend reproductive rights with administration. But I also just think rejoining the Paris Climate Treaty, for example. So we really are in we're in an unforeseen position with the climate, both because of this thing that's happened recently, and then something I like to talk about that's about taking the long views. There's a book I have that's a history of coal, and coal, the fossil fuel, and most of it is just this amazing history. But it was written at the end of the 90s, and at the end of the book it says, yeah, we really need to leave fossil fuel behind, but we have no alternative. And it took that to make me wake up and realize that renewable energy, wind and solar, were expensive, primitive technologies in their infancy 20 years ago. We've had an energy revolution more profound than anybody ever seems to say, profound enough that we actually can leave the age of fossil fuel behind. And it's, sometimes change looks dramatic, Shell lays off 10,000 people. That amazing moment in April when Texas oil futures dropped to negative $40 a barrel. But sometimes change looks so subtle, nobody really tells you it's there. Sometime between the year 2000 and about 2015, wind and sun went from being just too expensive and awkward and inadequate to being up to the challenge of having the most profound energy revolution, more profound than the industrial revolution we may ever have, leaving internal combustion and before that fire behind to a completely different system. So those are two of the things that I see in place right now that I don't hear a lot about, and but want to hear more about as we go forward, and that are all tied up with this election.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really like those possibilities are really so much what's at stake here. And I'm guessing I'm not alone in feeling relieved to hear you talk about this, because of course this is so much of what I want to see and why, this election is so important. And it can be so tempting to just focus on the things that are not going the way that we want, So thank you for, as you always do, like shining a light on what the other side. So the next thing I want to ask you, I've seen a couple of people mention in the chat is things, I've seen the word coup pop up in the chat a couple times. And, you mentioned before, like, let's focus on what there is for us to do now. How do we avoid the possibility of even having to fight that? But, we've been talking about hope, and of course, having hope doesn't preclude telling the truth about the worst things that could happen, the things that we're most afraid of. And this is something that's on probably all of our minds in one way or another, that there's the possibility of a stolen election. So I'd love to hear from you just a little bit about, or a lot of it, whatever you got for us, about what you're seeing about that. Like, if that does happen, what are you planning to do? What do you think we should do? How should we respond?
And I think that we really have two jobs right now. One is to do everything we can to have such a huge landslide election that the results are incontrovertible. And a really important piece of that is remembering the president is only as powerful as the system he's part of. If he violates that system profoundly, if that system doesn't support him, it's like what I keep imagining the White House, if they just cut the water and the electricity and even the cable TV and Wi-Fi, then the White House is not a power center anymore. If the staff leaves, if the nuclear suitcase takes a hike, and Trump has this fantasy that, l'état c'est moi, that power is somehow vested in him and he is like unto a god. But, an order is only as good as people's willingness to obey it, and they don't have that. So I want to, it's really important to try and win in a landslide so profound they can't deny it, and to continue also, and that doesn't only mean that like 70 million people vote for Biden and Harris. It also means that huge numbers of people commit both to a free and fair election and to ushering Donald Trump out of office, so that whatever happens, they've already made a commitment to move on. And, we do have to respect the results of elections even when we don't like them. Although if it's off topic, I would argue we should have nullified and had a do-over in 2016, because that election was corrupted enough that in a lot of other countries that would have happened. But so I think that we need to prevent a coup by taking care of the election and the electorate and keeping people hopeful about the fact that this other future is possible. I've already started reaching out to people. In 1991, I was in an affinity group called BADASS, which stands for Bay Area Direct Action Secret Society. I revived it in 2003 to do action against the Bush War in Iraq, and I am reviving BADASS, both with young climate activists and some of the people closer to my age who were in the group last time. We haven't done that much, but I think people should just start reaching out. If we're going to do direct action, start, I know people are doing nonviolence training, civil resistance trainings. There's a lot of good guidebooks. If you go to Waging Nonviolence, they have a wonderful guide to how to resist a coup. Because remember, they can attempt a coup. That doesn't mean they're going to succeed. If they attempt a coup, and essentially Trump has been attempting a coup all along, and he's kind of throwing it out in trial balloons and attempts to subvert the election. You can see his loyalists increasingly saying anti-democratic things. Essentially, the result of the vote doesn't matter, and that they're not going to respect it. So they can attempt a coup, and so we may get into a profound power struggle. I believe the majority of the people in this country both would not support a coup, and that we're not easy to subjugate. We're not, even a country like France where there's one capital and whatever happens in Paris kind of happens to the country. This is such a huge, sprawling, weird country. You subjugate Washington and New York, and that doesn't take care of Albuquerque and Seattle and Denver. And so I think hope for the best is a great slogan, and it's identical. Twin sister is and prepare for the worst. But I think you have to prepare, and I revised that this election season. You have to prepare for both the best and the worst. The best is preparing for the end of Trump, which I think we can hardly imagine. What would it be like not to have to look at that grotesquerie every day? And we have to prepare, for, the best case scenario of the end of Trump is that we vote him out. The worst case scenario is that we thwart a coup. And the fact that in that crazy debate last night, that appalling moderator asked Pence a polite little question about basically, are you still interested in practicing democracy, or are you going to stage a coup? To translate her polite question about respecting the results. And he refused to answer that he would respect the results if they lost, and just asserted they would win and said a bunch of crazy stuff. The fact that they are openly talking about a coup is so outrageous, but that doesn't mean they can succeed. And I feel like power and energy and support is hemorrhaging from them steadily right now. So, and a lot of what we've seen with Trump the last few months is a desperate man. And the fact that he's desperate. Here's another hope rule that I want to share with everyone that I always think is really important. Sometimes the people who estimate you best are your enemies. When you saw that the brokers and captains of finance around the world were terrified by Occupy Wall Street, that told us that Occupy Wall Street was actually very important, even though people sitting in their assemblies maybe didn't feel that way. Trump is terrified, and and he's afraid of you, and that should make you feel good. He knows that we very well might succeed, and that we have the capacity to do so. Your enemies often will acknowledge your power even when you don't believe in it yourself. But I digress.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Perfect. It makes me think of one of my favorite quotes from your book, Hope in the Dark.
Yeah.
One of the first couple chapters that I guess I'll read to you if that's okay. And to all of us. You said, hope is not a lottery ticket that you can sit on the sofa and clutch, feeling lucky. It's an axe that you break down doors with in an emergency. Hope should shove you out the door because it will take everything you have to steer the future away from endless war, from the annihilation of the earth's treasures and the grinding down of the poor and marginal. To hope is to give yourself to the future. And that commitment to the future is what makes the present inhabitable. And it just feels so relevant to bring that into this because like you were saying, our enemies will make some guesses about what we might do, but because they know that we're here to really fight for what the future is that we are here to fight for, right? Like the future that we are fighting for lives in us, it comes through us, it needs us. So as we start to come to the end of this part of our conversation, before we shift into taking action, I'm wondering if you would speak a little more about the kind of hope that you talk about as strategy. That it's not just practical, reasonable, as we've talked about already, but it's strategic for us to keep our eye on it. Why do we need it to win?
And if you don't believe you can win, you're not going to try really hard. My friend Yotam Marom, who was young and in Occupy Wall Street and is a trainer and organizer and a wonderful human being, wrote this remarkable thing. God, now I have my hope in the dark here. Let me see if I can quickly find it, but I probably can't. Well, he basically says a lot of people on the left don't really believe you can win. And if you can't win, you can just be awesome. And that's when we get into being perfect and tearing down people who aren't as perfect as we are and kind of cultivating our purity. And I think really doing the work often means getting muddy, working with people you agree with about this one important thing, but not everybody, working with electoral politics, and which, is not your true spiritual home. And so you really do see a lot of people who don't believe they're going to win. And you also see around the edges of people who think they can win, often people using process perfectionism and kind of call out culture denunciations, et cetera, to kind of, draw the energy out of the movement and catch up people in internal squabbles and things like that. And, when there's racism and sexism and et cetera in an organization or movement, it does need to be addressed. But you do get people separate from that who can really just sabotage confidence, vitality, the kind of friendship that knits people together. And part of it, and it does come out of that sense of wanting to be awesome rather than winning. So I think if you're really hopeful, you really want to win, and you're looking at that thing and you're saying, here's all the stuff that we have to do to get there. And I know a lot of people, my friend Bob Fulkerson in Nevada has been doing great work since the early 90s, where like you have to go talk to people you don't agree with. You have to find common ground with people where it's like we have this much in common, but we don't have this other stuff in common, which I actually think is a really great process. And so hope is really kind of the eyes on the prize that gets you to do the things that you need to do. And without it, I think you get into what makes this movement awesome rather than what makes this movement effective. And you don't want to compromise. You don't want to be a sellout, but you do want to be effective. You want to win because that's what you're there for. You want to stop, the fossil fuel industry. And sometimes that means one specific thing. You want to stop fracking in California. You want to stop, the KXL pipeline. You want to stop permitting. You want New York State to ban fracking, which happened. We haven't had enough victories, but we've had a lot of victories because people also picked out, this is other part of hope, and this goes back to the Cajun Navy. People pick out really specific things they can win. You can always win something there's no always. You can often win something even when you can't win anything, win everything. And often winning something makes the next thing winnable. And I think feminism made marriage equality possible, which is too long to get into. So you need to, understand that that incrementalism is often the opposite of compromise. It's how you get to your goal.
Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome.
So I want to ask you one more question. But I also just want to acknowledge to everyone, thank you everyone for sending in your questions. And I'm not going to directly ask, just for the time that we have, I'm not going to directly ask Rebecca any of those questions that you all submitted tonight, but as I'm looking at them, I'm seeing that many of them are reflected in the conversation we've had. So thank you again for your engagement and for sharing them with us. So my final question for you, Rebecca, is, so we have 26 days.
Yeah.
Which makes my heart beat a little faster when I think about that, looking at the countdown. And, you know, I'm not much for like pump up sports movies, but it makes me think of like, you know, Friday Night Lights or one of those shows where, again, not something I've seen, but sort of an image I have in my head of like the team in the locker room huddled up before the big game, you know, and we've all got our arms around each other and we're like, okay, everybody, we're going to go out there and leave it all on the field. So that's kind of how I'm thinking about this moment of what we're doing here, huddled up, getting ready to go out there. So there are 230 people here and probably more watching on Facebook that all want to leave it all out on the field, want to give it everything that they've got, and are willing to do whatever it's going to take to change the trajectory of the things that we fear, to move us toward the victory that we need to see for the world that we want. So what wisdom do you have for your team as we get ready to go out there and play our hearts out?
One thing that I found really useful, I think it was my friend Gabriel Valdez said on Facebook a while back, you don't actually need to obsessively read the news. You know everything you need to know now. You know, we know which Senate races are competitive that could, that would flip the Senate. We know who we want to win the presidency. You know, we know where we stand. And there's this thing, I call it news hypervigilance, that I have the sense that I need to check every 5 minutes to see what new scandals and eruptions and lies have happened. It can really kind of suck a lot of your time and energy. You know, I saw somebody saying, you know, the half hour you just spent doom scrolling could have sent 1,000 texts to voters in this swing state. I think that everybody needs to figure out what is their piece of the action. Are they texting? Are they phone calling? Are they sending postcards? Are they going door to door in a swing state? Are they raising money? Are they, you know, what piece of winningness is yours, and just stick to it. And one of the things that is really hard to quantify, but I'm just beginning to get a sense of how vast the effort is on our side, how many people, and everybody I know seems to be doing some get out the vote thing in one way or another. I think you know, those of you who can be poll watchers and poll workers, that's really great. And helping people even know how to vote. There's some nonpartisan stuff, and just making sure everybody knows what the rules are, where their ballots go, where their polling place is if they're going to vote in person, how to drop their ballot off in person if they don't want to mail it, you know, if they have an absentee ballot. So it's really just you don't need to know everything, and you're not going to fix everything. Just find your piece of it and keep fixing it, or keep working on it. I think that's the main thing. And know that you will wake up on November 4th and there will be more work. Even if the people we want to win, you know, they're not all Ocasio-Cortez. We're going to have to push them. You know, the best case scenarios will get people we have to push really hard on a lot of the things we believe in, which is great work and a lot more pleasant than trying to prevent them from active harm to trans people and women, and, you know, who need reproductive rights, and refugee children and everybody else. We'll be able to, you know, so we'll be able to stop fighting a lot of battles if, you know, this team wins, so we can fight and push better on other ones. But I think we all know what to do. We know, you know, and we will post, I will keep posting Daniel Jubileer's great list. My friend Brian Kolker, who sent me 1,200 postcards to distribute, to send to support Jamie Harrison's race against Lindsey Graham. You know, I wrote my 100 and mailed them yesterday. We all have our piece. Just find your piece. You know, put your boat in the water and rescue 11 people.
So well said, Rebecca. I feel pumped up now. I feel like ready to go. I hope you all feel ready. Give some sparkles if you're like feeling, okay, what's my action? Where am I going? What am I doing? What's up? Yes. One of the core things that I'm taking away out of this too is, as we're looking at action, what a skill hope is and how strategic it is. And, you know, now is the perfect time for us to, as we go forth and take action, which we're going to be talking more about in just a moment here, as we go forth, you know, keeping in mind, how can we cultivate this skill of hope in every single action that we take, taking that middle path that is neither pessimism nor optimism, but actually walking that middle way of saying, I don't know how this is going to play out, but I see that something is possible and I'm willing to believe that it's possible and take action for it. That is what I'm taking out of here and what I'm excited to bring to my organizing. And, you know, first, you know, we've been talking a lot. I know for me on calls like this, it's just so helpful to take a moment to digest what we're getting out of this. And so I'd love for folks to just take 2 minutes to listen into yourself and consider what golden nuggets will you be taking with you from this conversation and applying to your action. And share that in the chat so we can all benefit, because I know I love seeing some of the takeaways from other people so I can get something else from it myself.
Look at all those comments. I wasn't able to look at them because I was talking, but wow.
Yep. Hope in action as action. Put your boat in the water and rescue 11 people. Less doom scrolling, more small, sweet actions. Perfect, Molly. Hope matters, but when it feels shaky, just seeing the power and strength and the embraces where we can go. Oh, thank you, Ronnie. We love you too. Thanks for being with us, everybody. And we still got some more good stuff for you too. We got some real clear next steps everybody can take together. So stick with us. Find your peace. Keep working it. Yes. Yep. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen because I want to give you all some really clear next steps here that we can take. And Rebecca said it best just a moment ago. It's that there's nothing else you need to learn about the presidential election. Just unplug from the input, focus on the output. It's time to get people out to the polls. It's time to defend the right to vote. It's time to get in action. Here are the 3 things and the timeframes that we suggest for you. There are plenty of actions you could take. Right now, check your registration and register to vote if you haven't yet, and register to vote by mail if you can at votesaveamerica.com. You know, we don't know when one of us might get COVID, so it's good to have that backup plan in case for whatever reason life happens, we can't get to the polls. Make sure that you have that plan to vote. In the next 24 hours, later tonight, tomorrow, talk with
Sorry, I'm interrupting you because I think you have a slide that you want to be showing people so they know what the URLs are that you're pointing.
That's so true. Thanks. I had it up, but I wasn't actually.
Sorry to cut you off, but so everyone can see it. Perfect.
So now you can see it. Yeah. So in the next 24 hours, check with 3 of your people, family, friends, about their plan to vote. You know, we had 500 people registered for this event, which means they're either here or they're on Facebook Live or they're going to get the email later from this. And I did the rough math. And actually, if each of us contacts 3 people every day for the next, every day from today until the election, just those 500 people could actually turn out 40,000 people to vote. And 40,000 happens to be the number that Donald Trump won Pennsylvania by. So it's possible that the people engaged with us in some way, shape, or form right now could swing this election. There is so much possibility here, and it's worth putting our attention on that. So talk to your people. I know it can be uncomfortable, but I promise a bit of discomfort is a small price to pay for winning this election and waking up on November 4th saying, I did what was mine to do. And then in the next week, sign up for a shift. Sign up for a shift to make calls, send texts, knock doors, right? There are a lot of great organizations who have found out safe ways to do this. Changing the Conversation Together is one of them. The Democratic Party is even knocking doors in places. We have a whole bunch of resources that one of our buddies is going to put in the chat at radicalsupport.org/GOTV. And some of you have been asking for like the quotes and other inspiration from this conversation. We're going to put that up on that website as well, so you can have access to it. The recording from this event is going to go up on that website, in addition to some inspiration from some other teachers who we've been really appreciating recently. So radicalsupport.org/GOTV. And you know, bottom line, I have a hunch that you already have some ideas about what action would be the best fit for you, right? Whether it is signing up for a phone shift, writing letters, maybe you're already signed up for something. But take a moment now, whether you've already been in action or you've kind of been waiting on the sidelines, take a moment right now to make a promise to yourself. Do yourself that favor, to make a promise of what is the next specific action you're willing to take. And put that promise in the chat right now so we can all cheer each other on for the actions that we're planning to take. And you know, I want to open the chat too so I can see what you're saying. Yes. So, and just to be clear, like, I know there's going to be so many steps that you're going to take in the next few weeks. And something that we talk about with our clients at Radical Support Collective quite often is this idea called the small, sweet step. And so what that means is just don't overthink this, folks. You might be wondering, what's the right thing to do? Am I going to have what it takes? Am I actually going to make a difference? Just take a look at what is the simplest, sweetest, right thing for you to do next, and then go do that thing. And I promise you, once you do that thing, A, you'll feel good because you did a thing, and B, you'll see where to go after that. So just take that next small, sweet step and put that action in the chat. Yes, talk to 3 beloveds who I think may not vote and convey my wish that they do. I'm doing lots of that. Write postcards. Yep. Invite my mom to text bank with me this weekend. Love it. Love it, love it. I'm gonna make some art that shows the White House being unplugged, cut off, and share that, hopefully with a reminder to vote. Auction off art to raise money, I assume. Yeah. Isn't this just, we can see this kind of flooding in. Isn't just this the best to be around other people who care at the same level that you care about this stuff?
Hope is contagious.
It is.
and engagement is contagious. You know, seeing other people do things and do good things is a lot of what makes people do these things.
Yep. Yep. And I hope each of you will kind of take this and bring it with other people, because we've talked about hope in kind of a way that people aren't used to talking about hope. And so I hope you all are taking some of these ideas and bringing it to your family, your friends, you know, people in your community, and saying, hey, you know, there's some possibility here. Would you like to make some calls with me? Would you like to send some texts with me? Would you like to sit down over you know, a socially distanced glass of wine and write some postcards with me, you know, whatever it might be. At the end of the day, it's like, there is so much possibility in what we can do. And sometimes I notice I find myself worrying, oh, I'm just a drop in the bucket. Does it really matter? Maybe I can, you know, watch Netflix tonight and I can call off. And not knocking Netflix, but sometimes we use it as an excuse to not do what's really important to us. And you know when that's happening. Just raise your hand if you've ever used Netflix or something like that as an excuse. Yeah, we sometimes think, oh, I'm a drop in the bucket. We use that. But folks, we together are the bucket. Right? We have this opportunity to come together in collective action. And actually, even just the people on this call could make such an impact that it swings the election. We can't predict how our actions are going to make an impact.
Sorry.
Oh, please, Rebecca.
I was just going to say Wisconsin was 10,000 voters. And, you know, the swing states were so close. And, you know, and that's, I think, the no regrets is that may we not have the sense that had we just worked a little harder on this state, And so sorry to interrupt you, Seth.
Oh no, it's so apt, because it's like, I know I don't want to wake up on November 4th and say, I want to be able to say, like, I worked my butt off. I didn't exhaust myself entirely so that I'm a pile of goo, but I did the work that was mine to do. I found just that sweet spot, right? And by the way, I think a really important part of this, what's sustaining me, is getting support from an organization. There are a lot of great organizations out there. I want to specifically give shout outs to People's Action and Changing the Conversation Together. I've been involved with both of them in different ways, and they provide so much support to train you how to do the work, to kind of coach you through the process of doing the work. Like, you end up feeling so lifted up and in this community, so you can take the kind of vibe we have now and bring it into your activism, into your leadership. You don't have to do this stuff alone, folks. You can get a whole team of folks cheering for you and supporting you every step of the way, and feel that satisfaction of like, yeah, I did it with people. So if you haven't yet, make a promise, pick an action, and ask a friend to join you. Maybe join an organization so you have so much support to do this work. Yep. People's Action and Changing the Conversation Together. They'll all be up at radicalsupport.org/GOTV. So go there. You're going to get a follow-up email with these resources also. So, never fear. We'll make sure you got all that good stuff. Thank you, Jeremy, for posting that. And, if you do want support to get clear on a plan, maybe you've taken your action, you're wondering what's next, or you really want to get a very clear exactly, how you're going to go about this thing to make the biggest difference. Or maybe you notice some worries and doubts, like every single time I sit down to make calls, I hear this voice that's like, they're going to hate you. You're not going to be good at this. It's not going to be, worth your time, right? It's just, I've made hundreds and hundreds of calls. Every time I hear that voice, it can be so powerful to have a coach to help you just turn down the volume dial on that voice of worry and doubt a little bit, so that you can actually show up with your whole self and not exhaust yourself as you're doing that work. So we're offering these free 30-minute coaching for election action sessions. We've assembled a team of 12 coaches, so we have plenty of capacity to take really good care of you. And we'd also love it if you send anybody our way who might love that support. And I know we have some of the coaches on the call, so if you're a coach for election action, just give us a wave, and you know that we're real people and we're here to support you. And by all means, book a session, radicalsupport.org/election. And finally, another piece of support, it's just that if you take only one thing away from our time today, and I hope you've taken a lot of things away, the bottom line is that keeping our attention focused on the very real reasons to be hopeful right now is one of the most strategic things we can do to support ourselves, to support each other, to support the people we love, so that we can ultimately run through the finish line of this election with our hearts and our minds intact for whatever is next, to have that resilience to keep going, because there's going to be work to do after the election. And hope is kind of that fuel. So just take a moment to look for yourself. We've been in this experience of hope all day. Would it be all right with you if this experience of hope stayed with you as you take action to win this election? Would that be okay to have hope in your action? Would that be all right to be lifted up to be able to do that? And so to support you in that, we're launching this Hope in Action challenge on Instagram. And so if you're on Instagram or Facebook, you can see what it's all about and join us by following @Radical Support Collective on Instagram or facebook.com/Radical Support Collective. It'll get cross-posted there as well. And what it is every day, today, the first post is up through the day after Election Day, we'll be posting some prompt or question to help you connect with why you do this work and what are the possibilities that you would love to see come about. And you know your why, but if you're anything like me, sometimes, we talked about this earlier, it just gets lost amid all of the despair thrown at us just from 2020. It's been a year. So we want to help you really keep your attention on what you want to be creating as you take action. That's what we would love to be giving you, which is far more powerful than focusing on what could go wrong, as we've been talking about here. And so just go ahead and do that right now. You know, take out your phone, open Instagram or Facebook, follow us at Radical Support Collective. We promise you won't regret it. And you know, you'll see the prompts come up. And for those of you who are opening Instagram or Facebook, you might have already noticed that kind of like magnetic undertow of despair and cynicism that we often find there. You know, sometimes it's funny, but it's like kind of still pointing our brains in the attention of everything that could go wrong. And so one of the bonuses for joining us in this challenge is that in addition to giving you a simple way to put your attention on that hope and possibility that will get you through the finish line, by participating, you'll also give your friends the gift of that by sharing what you're getting and what you're seeing from these prompts and questions that we ask. So that as your buddies are scrolling through the funny, you know, cynical fly on Mike Pence's face memes, they'll also get that hit of hope. And how cool would that be? Like, how amazing would that be if we had a movement of hope and possibility, this kind of upswell on social media to just put people's attention on what's possible and turn down that dial of despair a little bit. Give people permission to put their attention on hope right along with us. So take a moment to follow us, and we'll be also sharing some small sweet steps you can take to help get out the vote so that you can get some prompts as we go for what are some very clear actions you can be taking. And the first prompt actually went up earlier today. It's what do you care about that you are working for? Some people are already engaging. So what do you care about that you are working for? What do you love that you would love to be protecting? What's the vision that you would love to be bringing forth in this world? And we'll have some more goodies tomorrow, including I think we have one from Rebecca tomorrow. Rebecca's going to be giving us a couple of prompts as we go here. So we're going to have some celebrity posters come in. And I'd actually love to hear from you, Rebecca. What are you excited for about this idea of kind of seeding Facebook and Instagram with hope?
Oh, I came up with 4 questions for people to do posts in response to if they're so inspired. This is not homework, it's optional. One is, what is the historic victory that most inspires you? And it could be anything from women getting the vote, Black Panther breakfast party, Black Panther party breakfast program at, you know, marriage equality, first trans person elected at a statewide level. You know, it could be anything. So what is a historic victory that most inspires you? What is your secret superpower? What historic event in your lifetime most surprised you in a positive light? And what is the goal you can imagine achieving that you most desire to achieve and that would make the most difference? And we will post those somewhere.
Yep.
All shall be posted.
They will all be up on Instagram. Rebecca, they'll get cross-posted on our Facebook so you can share them with your audience. Yeah, would love to just have you, play with us on this. And again, kind of sow those seeds for hope and possibility out to your people who you love so they can sprout and we can actually have them growing even through the election. And we can get to the other side of the election and look out and say like, oh, we got through this with some ease. This is okay. This is pretty good. We're ready to do what's next. So that's what we want for you folks. And so, join us in this for some fuel to keep going about your work at Radical Support Collective. And speaking of fuel to keep going, a tradition we have at Radical Support Collective is to leave our clients, our program participants with some final fueling words. We end with a poem or a quote or a song. We actually asked Rebecca to pick something out for us today. And so Rebecca, I'll give you the final word, the poem, and anything else you want to say to these beautiful, beautiful people we have here.
We settled on the passage from the African writer, not the poem, right?
Correct.
Okay. This is a non-poem, which means I won't get the meter wrong, but I may get his name wrong. I just feel like I'm going to be posting hopeful things every day on the Book of the Face, and I feel like Jesse Jackson with Keep Hope Alive, but I think we already told you enough, so I'm going to read this extraordinary writer and climate organizer named Bayo Akalomafi. I think I got that right. And and he writes, I am quite confident that even as the oceans boil and the hurricanes beat violently against our once safe shores, and the air sweats with the heat of impending doom, and that our fists protest the denial of climate justice, that there is a path to take that has nothing to do with victory or defeat, a place we do not yet know, that the coordinates to, a question we do not yet know how to ask. The point of the departed arrow is not merely to pierce the bullseye and carry the trophy. The point of the arrow is to sing the wind and remake the world in the brevity of flight. There are things we must do, sayings we must say, thoughts we must think that look nothing like the images of success that have so thoroughly possessed our visions of justice. May this new decade be remembered as the decade of the strange path, of the third way, of the broken binary, of the transversal disruption, the chaotic moment, the post-human movement for emancipation, the gift of disorientation that opened up new places of power and of slow limbs. May this decade bring more than just solutions, more than just a future. May it bring words we don't yet know and temporalities. Sorry, it's a little bit hard to read in this light. And temporalities we have not yet inherited. May we be slower than speed could calculate and swifter than the pull of the gravity of words can incarcerate. And may we be visited so thoroughly and met in wild places so overwhelmingly that we're left undone, ready for composting, ready for the impossible. Welcome to the decade of the fugitive.
Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you
all
everybody.
for being
I'll
here.
see you all in the ether.
Yep. We'll see you online. We'll see you in the streets.
Thanks,
Hopefully
everyone.
we'll see you at the big party that we can all throw someday to celebrate the beautiful world we've created together. I look forward to that day. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Everyone.
Have a
We'll
good
share
night.
the quote in the follow-up email so that you all have it. I see some folks asking for it.
Yep.
We'll make sure you get it.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Recording in the quote.
Thank you, everybody. Don't stop now.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Go get 'em, team.